Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of HBHA Lore. I am absolutely thrilled today to be joined by an HBHA alum, graduate of the class of 2018, who has now migrated from Kansas City back to her earlier home of New York. And I am thrilled to welcome to the program Eliana Saidel. Eliana, welcome to HBHA Lore.
Hi, it's so great to be here. Thank you.
I am so thrilled to have you. So, I usually like to start with guests by talking with them about what they have done since their time at HBHA, and then we will wind our way back to talking about some HBHA memories, of course. So, you graduated from HBHA in 2018. It's now 7 years later. Where did you go to for undergraduate following your graduation from Hyman Brand?
I did a pretty niche program where I
Niche
ended up
program.
getting yeah, I got two BAs from two different colleges at the same time. So I did a double degree program between Columbia University, specifically Barnard College, where I got a degree in history, and at the same time, I was getting a degree from the Jewish Theological Seminary from its undergraduate school, List College. So I have a BA in Torah, Hebrew Bible and its interpretations is what that is formally called. And it's a really cool program where everyone in that program is getting two BAs from both schools at the same time. They happen to be about 6 blocks apart. Um, so it was great. There was a little break in the middle for COVID, which was started the middle of my sophomore year. So sophomore and junior year was college from home. But then I was lucky enough to be back on campus senior year. So I had a full in-person senior year, which was great. So yeah, I was in New York City.
That sounds wonderful. I'm curious about, you said that one of your majors was Hebrew Bible and interpretation. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So obviously, at HBHA, you're studying Torah and studying biblical text sources. I'm curious if there's anything you could talk about in terms of how like the college study might have differed or enhanced beyond the stuff that you were doing as a high school student, like just how that program might have differed from what it might look like at the high school level.
Yeah. One of the really interesting things about HBHA that I think prepared me for college and in a really important way is that it's a community day school, it's pluralistic. And so I was used to already learning from lots of different types of Jewish studies teachers, right? Rabbi Sassover and Miss Kachlon are very different from each other. And my classmates and I also like came from different backgrounds and had different experiences, and my experience at JTS was like that, but even more. Um, so one of the big differences is that I think in college there's more of a focus on Judaism for academic purposes as opposed to Judaism for like lived purposes, which I think is a lot of what the HBHA Jewish Studies curriculum is about, right? I remember one of the semesters, we learned the laws of Shabbat with Rabbi Sassover, and that was very much relevant to daily life or weekly life, I guess.
Yeah.
In that sense. But then in college, I took classes on historical critical methodologies, right? Different ways that people have interpreted and critiqued Torah over the years, and we learned about different streams of thought. And it's a different orientation,
Yeah.
um, maybe a little more critical in different ways,
Yeah.
than a high school education designed to really push and prod and extend the boundaries of what you think might belong in a Jewish studies classroom.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I'm curious on either the Hebrew text study side, or you said your other degree was, did you say was in history?
Yeah. Yeah.
Was there a particular area of focus in history, or was it more of
Yes.
a kind of a broader? So, what was the historical focus on that other side of that degree?
My concentration in the history department was war and revolution.
Okay.
Um, it was really cool. Yeah. So the Barnard History program is designed so that you have to pick a concentration, either a place across time, a time across space, or a theme anywhere, anytime.
Okay. All right, I'm tracking the different options. Okay, and you went with.
I went with a theme. I didn't want to shoehorn myself into a place or an era. And so I picked War and Revolution, which was great because then you got to jump around different parts of the world, different eras of history. And I liked studying War and Revolution because I think it's a really interesting cross section of lots of other themes in history. You get politics, you get economy, you get technological advances, you get some sociology, like you get all of the different pieces because when people revolt, they usually have really strong feelings that push them there.
So I've heard.
So yeah, I concentrated in War and Revolution, and my thesis was linked to
What was
that
it
theme.
about?
I wrote my thesis on the Jacobites in 18th century Scotland.
I know
Um,
them well.
yes, they
But
were
let's pretend for the sake of argument that I didn't know them all that well. What could you tell me about them that might be interesting?
the Jacobites were a failed revolutionary group. Their cause lasted around 50 some odd years, despite being soundly defeated by the English, by the Hanoverians. Every time they wanted to restore the Catholic Stuarts to the British throne after they had been ousted by the Protestants in the Glorious Revolution. And so I wrote about them and their failed attempts.
Well, that sounds like a when you started talking about your college degree, you said it was a fairly niche program. It sounds like your thesis is also a fairly niche subject. So I have two questions, and I'll bet you don't get a chance to talk about your
Yeah.
thesis all that much with people. So hopefully, it's something you're interested in sharing a bit about. I have two questions. One is, um, what drew you to that topic in the first place? Like how you ended up focusing on that, and then the second question I had connected to that is, that's maybe a thing that people don't know a lot about from several hundred years ago, but do you see any modern day relevance to anything you learned about? It could be about that thesis topic or just other things you studied regarding war and revolution, just to helping better understand the world today.
Yeah, I was drawn to them because I really loved that like 18th century revolutionary vibe, right? There's this idea that the 18th century, like the long 18th century was a very revolutionary time. You've got the Jacobites at the beginning of the century, and then later you have the American Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, and the French Revolution that all capped off that century. And so I don't know, the idea that there was something in the air, um, I was fascinated by, and I also found the Jacobites interesting because everyone thinks of the American Revolution as like the big pushback against the British, but the Jacobites were there first, and they really did try. Differences, obviously, they did not succeed. So I liked the idea of elevating their story. Also, to be completely honest, I had read Outlander, um, which is a historical fiction, slightly magic-y book series, and now very successful TV show that is set in the final rising, the final Jacobite rising. And so I had read those books a few years before, and they had stuck with me. Um,
Well, that's
and I had
awesome that you
about
had
them in
kind
school.
of this experience with a fantasy book that someone might think is just like a fun read, but then it ended up inspiring you to do this like very deep, intensive historical dive into something that ended up being your thesis that you wrote about.
Yeah, yeah. I remember reading Outlander and realizing that I had never learned about the Jacobites in school at any point ever. And I thought, that's weird. Why haven't I learned about them? And then I wrote a thesis about them because I figured I would fix that for myself.
It sounds like you had a pretty intensive studying time, tackling these two degrees at the same time. But you were also in New York, which is a very fun place to be, and on some fun college campuses. Aside from the time hitting the books on those two degrees, were there any particular highlights you want to share about your college experience? It could either be stuff connected to specifically college, other classes you took, extracurriculars or clubs that you were a part of, or just things that you did in the city during your college years.
Yeah, well, you know this about me. I'm a big Broadway
We'll get there,
fan.
Eliana. Don't you worry. But feel free to start us off right now.
I mean, that's the first thing that came to my mind. Living in New York City, um, and being a student is the best way to live in New York City because student deals, student tickets are everywhere. And I certainly took advantage of student Broadway tickets. But more than that, I learned how to play the Broadway lotteries, and so I would just go to shows all the time. And now for friends and family who are in New York, if they ever want to see a show on the cheap, I'm the go-to person of how to get into the Broadway lotteries. So blanket offer if anyone's in New York and wants to know how to see shows. I'm so happy to help.
Presumably, I'm assuming that you won some of those lotteries that you were
Oh
able to.
yeah.
What was the lottery ticket that you were most excited to win?
One of my friends and I won the $10 lottery for the Hamilton tickets,
Oh yeah,
um, which I know is something that you in particular have strong feelings about.
I do, and I have won the Hamilton lottery myself, as I believe I've shared the story with you.
Yeah.
So we've
Yeah.
both gotten the $10 Hamilton experience, which is
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, that one was pretty special. Um, Also, I have won the lottery to see Moulin Rouge, I think 3 times.
Wow, you're kind of
Um,
in the show by this point.
I mean, I may have it memorized a little bit, but yeah, so I got to see a lot of shows, which was really great. And also as a student, you can get into a lot of the museums for free or a lot less than normal cost of admission.
What's your
Um,
favorite museum in the area?
the Museum of Natural History
Tell
is
us a
one
little bit
of my
about it for
favorite.
people who might not have visited before. Why, if they come to New York, should people hit up the Museum of Natural History?
I'm not a huge art museum person myself. I've always liked the like science museums more than the art museum. So the Museum of Natural History, I really like. It's got some really cool dinosaurs up in the front. It has this great space exhibit. It's very interactive. It has a planetarium, which has some pretty cool shows. There's a hall of gems and minerals that's really great. There's this one room that has a giant blue whale like hanging from the ceiling. Um, the nice one of my
Usually,
favorite
blue whales are in the water, like below the ground. I like this aerial blue whale that we've got here, hanging from the ceiling.
It's huge. It's huge and it hangs and the whole room is blue and like suffused with this like oceany light, like you know how like how light plays through water, like that type of vibe. Um, it's a museum that really makes you feel like each room is its own space
Yeah,
that has been intentionally designed in every aspect. And I love the experience of going through it and really feeling that each piece is its own thing that stands on its own. And also, as you go through the museum, you get like pieces of the different parts of living on Earth, and it feels like a cohesive whole.
sounds extremely cool. If I'm
Me
there,
too.
I'd love to check it out. All right, let's move beyond your college years a little bit. So you graduated a few years ago. So now you've started to embark on your career. What have you been doing work wise since you graduated with that dual degree in Hebrew in biblical text studies and history?
So immediately after college, I started working as a springboard fellow through Hillel International. So I was on a college campus for the next 2 years. I was working at Hunter College Hillel. Um, I was doing engagement work, right? I would sit in the lounge and talk to students and get them invested in Hillel. And I did a lot of Jewish teaching, which was really great.
Like in
Um,
a classroom or like in an informal, just like Hillel group meeting type of way?
Informal, well, different flavors of informal. So there were some that were very informal, like I would sit in the lounge and people would, sit with me and we would talk some Torah. But Hillel International has this program called the Jewish Learning Fellowship, where different campuses get a curriculum, like it gets handed to us. And we assemble cohorts of students who meet once a week over a meal to learn through this curriculum. And so I taught 4 rounds of that. So it's in a weird in between space where it's not a classroom like a normal classroom, but it's also not like a drop in, come if you want to. Like it's a stipended fellowship with a coherent arc. So I taught 4 rounds of that, plus there was one about Israel that I taught. And then in my second year in the fellowship, which was a 2-year fellowship, I actually got to write my own curriculum and
Oh,
got funding to write my own curriculum and create my own cohort and teach it. So um, on Hunter Hillel's campus, I got to do a very wide range of Hillel activities, but it's a small staff. So I got to do a lot of the engagement work and the Jewish learning work.
You loved the college experience so much you didn't want to leave, and you wanted to go
Yeah.
straight from learning to teaching. I'm curious about this curriculum you devised, right? So you have kind of that freedom, and you've just spent the past 4 years learning a lot about history and Jewish texts. I'm curious, with that freedom, what you decided to focus on, and what you designed, and also why you thought, hey, I have this opportunity to teach kids, to teach college students. What did you choose to focus on with that?
The cohort was called Offbeat Torah, which I was very proud of the name. The idea was that it would be stories and elements of Torah that you didn't learn in Sunday school, that you didn't learn in day school. The stories that were weird and wacky and, full of things that are not necessarily so easy to sanitize. And I was drawn to it because I had a lot of students. We had a lot of modern Orthodox students at Hunter College, who came in and sort of didn't really want to do Jewish learning with us because they thought, oh, like I've been in Jewish day school my whole life. I went to yeshiva, whatever it was. Like I'm done, like there's nothing else. And as someone who went to Jewish day school for my whole life and then chose to get a Jewish studies degree in college in addition to something else, I learned that there's no such thing as I know everything. There's always more to learn. And I really wanted to push those students in particular a little bit. And so for that first curriculum that I ran, I focused on women in the Torah. And so I elevated the stories of women who are not Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, Leah. And so we talked about Tamar. We talked about Jezebel and Natalia, these two evil queens. We talked about Yael, who is like a military figure, and Devorah. We talked about rabbinic stories about the daughter of Pharaoh and how actually she joined the Israelites when they left Egypt after the Exodus and ended up, marrying one of the 12 spies, one of the good ones. And so I brought in all of these. We talked about Lilith. That was a really interesting week about like different narratives around Lilith and how she's different from Eve. So I wanted to open Torah for these college students and make it something that is not just, check, done, learned that. And it went really well. I had a cohort of, I think, 5 or 6 students who met with me every week, and it was great.
That sounds extremely cool. That curriculum. The theme I'm seeing, I kind of emerge both from what you chose to study and what you focus on when you have the opportunity to teach, is taking things that people think they know well, like, oh, history, the Torah, right, war, revolutions, but really finding kind of your own unique pathway into it and being much more interested, maybe not in like what the dominant narrative is or what the most commonly learned thing about it is, but looking at, hey, what's kind of this side story, this lesser known story, which doesn't get all of the attention always and isn't the focal point of classes, and seeing how deep and rich that text can be and how much there is to learn beyond just like what you said, what people assume they know, or what is kind of like the core curriculum that people are going to learn at most places, which, like you said, is so cool because it never really is going to end, whether that's with Jewish studies or historical studies or literary studies, right? There's always kind of a deeper level and a more offbeat path, like you said, that you can go down and learn from. So that sounds really like a really amazing experience. Did you enjoy it?
It was great. I really wish that I had come up with it earlier in my 2 years there,
Huh?
that I could have run it more, but it ended up happening only in that last semester of this 2-year fellowship. And then I left Hunter Hillel and started working at the Hartman Institute, which is not somewhere where that can continue in that way.
And is that where you are right now at the Hartman
Yes.
Institute? So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about that.
I have just hit my 1 year a few months ago, so I've been there for over a year. At Hartman, I'm a program coordinator, so I do program operations and logistics specifically for the Hartman Teen Fellowship. So Hartman has a body of programmatic work for young people, right? So teens, college students, and the educators who support them. So in my first year, I was working more on the educator side, and supporting our programs for educators. And then over the summer, I switched, and so now I'm supporting the teen work. So we have a Chapeton that kicks off the year, that we are very, very busy preparing all the logistics for. So I've stepped away from the teaching for the moment, and I'm doing some of the more technical behind the scenes pieces of informal Jewish communal education.
Well, the trend I'm sensing is you're trying to tackle every single aspect of the Jewish educational experience, from student to college student to teacher to behind the scenes supporter. You're kind of your own one-stop shop within the Jewish education world.
I'm trying to round myself out and be in that world. Yeah, I love informal education. I love um like the non-classroom, I love the opportunities of non-classroom education and the way that the things that it can elevate, and the different modes that it can be in. And so Hillel was a really great experience to be on the front end of that, delivering it. And now I've taken a step back and doing the back end of that so I can see all the things that go into it. Hopefully, which will the idea is that will make me able to do both going forward with a mind for the other, whichever one I end up in, that I can have a more well-rounded perspective on how it all happens.
That makes perfect sense. So we'll see what your next path is on that winding career path.
Thank you.
All right, let's wind the clock back a little bit here to your time at HBHA. So you did not start your schooling career at HBHA. You moved
Correct.
here from New York.
Yeah.
So when you were, I think, was eighth grade your first year starting at HBHA?
Yeah.
So tell us maybe just briefly about your schooling experience before you came to HBHA, and then we'll dive in and talk about the 5 years you were able to spend here with us.
Yeah. So growing up in New York, I went to Jewish day school as well. I started it was only one school. I went to Kinneret Day School, which is like HBHA, it's a community non-denominational school. It also had relatively small classes, so that piece was familiar to me when I made the switch. But Kinneret had a really strong Hebrew program. It was organized like half the day Hebrew and half the day English. And when we learned Jewish studies, we learned them in Hebrew. So that was like really a difference. And I was there from pre-K until seventh grade. And then over the summer between seventh and eighth grade, my family moved to Kansas City. And I remember shadowing, we came to visit in May. And I remember Amanda Sokol was the person in my class I was assigned to shadow the day that we were there. And I remember thinking that HBHA was physically a lot bigger, but like the classes were smaller, and that was weird in my brain. But yeah, so it was quite a transition.
Well, I was so I can tell you about it from my perspective because we started at HBHA the same year. Well,
Yes.
kind of. Technically, I started at HBHA in 1996 as a kindergartner, but my triumphant return as a teacher was the same year that you joined. So,
Yeah.
and you were in my very first class. Actually, two of them. My first year, I taught you in Algebra 1 and in eighth grade. I can tell you from my perspective, I think I remember telling you this at some point. I didn't know it was your first year there until like quite a bit into your first year.
Really?
Yeah. Maybe someone had probably told me like heads up, like, hey, this is a new student. But I was new, everyone was new to me. So it's not like but I think that really speaks well to how, even though you said it wasn't an adjustment, how quickly you were able to acclimate yourself to your class and your classmates. Because from my perspective, you just fit seamlessly right in right at the beginning. But from your perspective, how was it? I know that you had a really tight-knit class and really just a wonderful class of students. But how did that adjustment feel on your end joining, in eighth grade, right? It's not even kind of a time, it's not like a kind of a natural, like, oh, beginning of
Yeah.
middle school, beginning of high school. That could be a tough time to join. So how did it go from your perspective?
Um, I mean, it was certainly it took effort, and I certainly think it was not the easiest thing I've ever done, but I think I was really lucky to enter into the class that I did. I think that year there were 16 of us. We graduated with 14, but I think we had 16 in eighth grade. Um, and there were certainly, I think most of them had been there since they were in kindergarten. But I knew that I was not the only one who hadn't been there since kindergarten. There were other people who came in at various points in elementary and middle school. So that was helpful, I think, in just terms of my own nerve. But also, I think the eighth grade camping trip was a really big equalizer that I didn't anticipate. Famously, it was a bit of a disaster of a trip.
Tell us
Um,
more. We love a disaster story on HBHA and lore.
Yeah, so the trip was in October, so like early enough in the year that I was nervous about it, but it ended up being delayed a few weeks because that fall, I don't know if you remember this, but the government shut down for a few weeks because they couldn't pass the budget. Um, and so our trip was supposed to be a few weeks prior when it was still like warmer and towards the end of summer because we were going to go camping for 4 days, but the government shut down, so all the national parks were closed. And so when they finally reopened, we went, and it was mid late October. The first few days of the trip were great. We did hiking, we did archery, normal camping things. It was perfectly lovely. And then on the last day of the trip, we went canoeing. Um, and we were going down the river. We was like several miles worth of river that we were going to canoe down. And the first half of the day was really lovely. Everything was fine. And then towards the middle of the afternoon, we get to a part of the river that was narrower and the rapids were faster. And two trees, one on each bank, had fallen to create a barrier in the river that you couldn't go through. And many of us, myself included, didn't see it quickly enough.
Said, what's going through this tree? We don't care.
Well, we tried to stop it. So the first canoe, which if I remember right, was Julia, Paul, and Harry Flamini were in that first one, slammed right into it, capsized, no chance. And then there was a crew of like 4 or 5 boats, including mine, that were like a little far enough behind that we saw it happen, but not far enough behind that we could really protect ourselves. So we like pulled over to one side, and I remember we were all like clutching at tree roots trying to stay away from it, but like we couldn't cross the river to the other side because on the other side of on the other bank was kind of like some beachy, like there was enough space that you could get out and walk around, but we were on the wrong side of the river for it. And so we all ended up capsizing as well. So I actually remember being in the water in October in like jeans. It was freezing, trying to free the canoe because it got lodged under a tree. And then Mr. Welton, when he finally got there, was annoyed. He was like, "Get out of the water! Like it's not worth hypothermia to save this canoe." So the people in the back were fine. They managed to get to the right side and go around. But I think it was like a good 2/3 of the class capsized. We lost 2 boats, so we had to be in
But no students. No students. Very
did not
important.
lose any students. Mr. Brown was in a kayak and like was fishing people out of the water.
Yes.
So for the next 5 years, we would thank Mr. Brown for saving our lives often and totally out of context.
But no, it was he needed to be thanked. He was a kayak rescuer.
He really was. But anyway, so the reason I'm telling it right is that we were trauma bonded after that. I think there was something about like I'm swimming in a river in October and then we all are like shivering, freezing, sick. That sort of broke the ice a little bit for me.
Broke the ice and straight into the pond.
Yeah. So the eighth grade camping trip being early in my time, I think was helpful in terms of my like adjusting to eighth grade, but also, I mean, I was the clergy kid, right? We moved because my mom got a job out here as the cantor at Beth Shalom, and so I knew how to talk to people, I think. And I knew how to sort of like muscle through my own discomfort at being the new kid. I think I also sort of embraced it, and I was like, yeah, I'm new. I'm from New York. Like I have interesting things to say, and used that to my advantage a little bit. You'd have to ask my classmates if that came off as annoying, but
I'm
um,
sure they absolutely loved it and loved you. Um, no, and like you said, that you had that shared river swimming experience to bond you guys for life.
yeah,
Um, then obviously you spent all of high school with us, and you and I were fortunate enough to spend quite a bit of time together in high
yeah,
school, because I certainly taught you in some classes, some English classes, some fun electives. We had a
yeah,
Jewish literature elective together, which was very fun,
yeah.
and literature and film elective.
That
But
one was great.
I would say most importantly, we did 4 plays together. You
Yes.
were in, not just in, but really had starring leading roles in the first 4 plays I directed, which were Arsenic and Old Lace, Philadelphia Story, The Laramie Project, and The Curious Savage. Oh,
Technical place. The Philadelphia story is
uh,
here. This one's the Laramie Project. We switched colors on this one. And the Curious Savage is my senior year.
not to be outdone, I've got them here as well. Yeah, I can go toe to toe with you, Eliana.
Yeah, yeah.
So those were extremely fun, wonderful, memorable experiences on my end. But I'm curious, just kind of thinking overall, that was a lot of time spent doing theater in high school. How was that theatrical experience for you?
It was great. I had a lot of fun. It's easily one of my favorite things that I did in my HBHA career.
Good. Sell more tickets, Eliana, for me. This is good.
Yeah,
This is good.
everyone should come see the HBHA plays and be in them if you have an elective slot that you want to fill with something interesting. And I think it's a really also like good answer to how I ended up becoming part of the HBHA community was I really like threw myself into things. Um, and the play was really important, especially freshman year when I was still very much a new kid in that way. Um, and having one of the leading roles that year was a little scary. I definitely had a sense of imposter syndrome because my co-lead was Gabby Sonagine, who was a senior. But that was great because I really had her to like look up to and model myself off of a little bit in that space. But then it ended up just being something that I made my own. I think sophomore year playing Tracy in the Philadelphia story, I really felt that I like got to play and shine and do my own thing, and that was really really fun. And I loved knowing that I was doing it in a very like supportive and safe and um I don't know if there's an actual if this is a word, but like filled with camaraderie type of space.
Yeah, absolutely. And hey, the good news is these plays were several years ago, but the last play that you starred in your senior year, The Curious Savage, one of the stars of The Curious Savage is still here at HBHA. That's because your classmate, yeah, you're thinking, how is this possible? Your classmate and fellow actor Molly Kavanaugh, her character had in her mom, she had a child,
Yes.
and well, she'd actually lost a child.
Right.
And in the play, it's a sad part of the play. She's lost a child, but at the end of the play, there's this fantasy sequence where all of the characters who are
Right.
living in this group home, and all have experienced some sort of loss, envision the way that their life could be or the way that they imagine their life. And so we had a kindergartner at the time, the kindergartner in my family, who was very much not a kindergartner anymore, Amos Williams. He played her child
Maybe.
in
Yeah.
that last scene. He just sat on her lap, and then he got his own solo bow,
Yeah.
and it was a great
What
experience.
about that?
Now he's an eighth grader. So
Oh
you
my
know
God.
what? Even though you've graduated many years ago, you still got people from your plays still chugging along at HBHA.
Well, Sam Matzel also was in the play sophomore year with me, and he's here.
Right.
I know he talked about it on his episode, which I did listen to. Um,
Yeah, he was Uncle Willie in the Philadelphia story. He was your uncle.
he
The
was
uncle.
my weird, creepy uncle who said weird, creepy things.
So 3 of those plays that we did together were comedies, and they were all different. But I did squeeze one kind of very dramatic, serious play in there, which was the Laramie Project. For people who don't know, the Laramie Project tells a true story of this very horrific crime that happened, where this gay college student was murdered, and it tells the story of the aftermath of the town coping with it. There's like probably 70 or 80 different characters that are just portrayed by all the actors. We had a pretty big cast. I think we had like 16 or 17 people in that cast. But so everyone's playing really 4, 5, 6 different roles. And that was just a very different type of play. I'm curious how, just thinking back about that experience, how maybe the specific experience of acting in the Laramie Project might have been different from the other ones, or how you think back on it many years later.
Yeah, I think you're right, it's very different from the others. I think it demanded more of us. I had to put myself in a headspace that I had never really needed to put myself in before. I remember one of my characters was actually Matthew Shepard's father. And he delivers this monologue during the trial of one of the people who killed his son, where he's asked to decide whether or not that person should be considered for the death penalty or not. It's this beautiful monologue about his son and who he was, and then it transitions into his eventual decision that they don't want to pursue the death penalty for the perpetrators of that crime. And I think that monologue was maybe the hardest thing that I ever had to do on that stage. Not that the words were the hardest or that it was the longest amount of lines I ever had to memorize for you. But just that it required like a depth of emotion that was totally foreign to my experience. In every other role, even though I, was not an old lady or a 1920s debutante or whatever, there were things about those characters that I could access. And the Laramie Project was a really fascinating experience because it took a lot more to get to that point where I felt that I could, channel those characters and bring them out. And so I really appreciated that challenge. And also it felt like an important story to tell. It is still an important story to tell. And I remember people coming up to me and the rest of the cast, and I'm sure you got this as well, after the show, and saying like, wow, like this was really powerful. This was really different. And being part of it, being part of a thing that asked people to think, was really a great experience. And I was grateful to get to do that in addition to the other years where we got to make people laugh and do that. I think that was an important thing to do for our community.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said, and I'm glad that for you, it felt really, meaningful and important and challenging, right? For all the reasons you said. I might even be able to dig up that clip of you as Dennis Shepard, and use my editing skills if I can find it to embed it into this podcast.
My son Matthew did not look like a winner. He was rather uncoordinated and wore braces from the age of 13 until the day he died. But in his all too brief life, Matthew proved that he was a winner. On October 6, 1998, my son tried to prove that he could win again. On October 12, 1998, my firstborn son and my hero lost. On October 12, 1998, my firstborn son and my hero died, 50 days before his 22nd birthday. I keep wondering the same thing that I did when I first saw him in the hospital. What would he have become? How could he have changed his little piece of the world to make it better? Matt officially died in a hospital in Fort Collins, Colorado. He actually died in the outskirts of Laramie, where you, Mr. McKinney, and your friend, Mr. Henderson, left him up there by himself. But he wasn't alone. He had his lifelong friends with him. You're probably wondering who those friends were. Well, first he had the night sky and the same moon and stars that we used to see through a telescope. And then he had the sunshine and the daylight to shine on him. And he could smell the pine trees from the snowy range. And through it all he heard the wind, the ever-present Wyoming wind, for the last time. And he had one more friend with him too. He had God. And I feel better knowing he wasn't alone. Matt's beating, hospitalization, and funeral has focused worldwide attention on hate. Good is coming out of evil. People have said enough is enough. And I miss my son, but I am proud to be able to say that he is my son. Judy has been quoted as being against the death penalty, and it's been stated that Matt was against the death penalty too. Both of these statements are wrong. Matt believed that there were crimes and incidents that justified the use of the death penalty. And I believe in the death penalty too. In fact, I would like nothing better than to see you die, Mr. McKinney. However, this is the time to begin the healing process, to show mercy to someone who refused to show any mercy. So I am going to grant you life, Mr. McKinney, as hard as it is for me to do so, because of Matthew. So that every time you celebrate a birthday, a Christmas, the 4th of July, remember that Matt isn't. And every time you wake up in your jail cell, I want you to remember that you had the opportunity and the ability to stop what happened that night. You robbed me of something very precious, Mr. McKinney, and I will never forgive you for that. Mr. McKinney, I grant you life in the memory of one who no longer lives. May you live a long life, and may you thank Matthew every day for it.
Because I've got them on there. I've got the place filmed, except for the Philadelphia story, which I know we filmed, but has mysteriously disappeared over the years. And I've tried to track down, but I haven't been able to. But
that's the only one that I've watched, is the Philadelphia story.
I know we recorded it, but it's disappeared. We can off mic see if we can track it down together and piece that together.
I might have it in my Google Drive somewhere.
That would be an HBHA lore miracle. That's why I did the podcast, just to find the video clip of the Philadelphia story from 10 years ago. So like you said, you had a very fun, very, very lively class. You talked about a memorable experience you guys had on the camping trip. Any other experience, it could be in the classroom, out of the classroom, that just really sticks with you these many years later as like, this was just really either maybe it was a really fun time or a funny time or maybe even a sad time, but something that really was a memorable thing that you did together with your classmates?
Yeah. I mean, I think I get asked this question in various forms kind of a lot when I try to explain HBHA to people who have no context for it. Because it's a fascinating school. Like I talk about the Trebuchet Project.
Okay.
That in physics, in the honors physics and the other physics class, I don't remember what it's actually called, every year build life-size, fully functioning trebuchets, war machines, and siege engines, and launch things. I think we launched balls and water balloons to see who can throw them the farthest. And I remember we would like go outside and fire up the power tools and build these things out of wood and screws and stuff with Mr. Welton and Mr. Clower. And I loved doing things like that, where we took projects arguably to an extreme. Similarly, like on the opposite side, but like the same, the same vibe, but different font, is like when we went to the White House Decision Center and like really immersed ourselves in a historical moment and dressed up in costumes and were assigned roles of different characters who were at play in these different historical moments and played out the day. So like those two things sort of like sit on either side of my like school class projects that were really, really fun. Those are some big things, but also, I mean, I remember we brought a Wii into the senior lounge.
Oh my.
So that we could play Super Smash Bros. During lunch when we were seniors.
Don't give this to your seniors any ideas. Oh.
Sorry.
It's okay. We'll keep it in.
I'm sure that, well, actually, I'm not sure that that TV is still there.
I think it's gone. I think it's been removed, probably for wise reasons.
I mean, we played video games during.
Yeah, that's probably why. But it was fun while it lasted.
Yeah, no, it was. That was really great. But then also, like, we went on some really amazing travels. I mean, the Jewish Heritage trip, when my year, we went to Germany and Poland and Israel. Um, and those 2.5, 3 weeks are just like they're insane. They're in my brain forever. Um, I remember, I don't even know if I can pinpoint like a specific moment, but just everything from like the things we saw to like being on the bus for hours blasting music, to ending up at a hotel in Staten Island on the way home because our flight was snowed out and then we
Oh,
drove back.
that I remember. I remember when that happened. Did you guys have to drive home from
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the bus and drive from New
yeah.
York back to Kansas City?
Yeah, we landed back from Israel. It was snowing in New York, and so our flight was canceled. And you can't exactly rebook 30 people so easily. And so they brought us to a hotel to like while they were figuring out what to do. And so we sort of just like took over the whole lobby and spent like a day there just waiting. And then that evening they finally chartered a coach bus and they said anyone who wants to fly home on their own can, but otherwise we're driving home. And then we spent the next like 18 hours on this bus driving back. And I remember getting off the bus. My mom and all the other parents had come to pick us up. And I was just so exhausted. And I was like, I haven't slept in 3 days. Like I just need to go home.
Well, the one thing you want to do after a very intensive international 2.5 week trip with the same people is spend 30 hours on a bus with them driving across the country.
Yeah.
No, and going back to what you said about the White House Decision Center, just for people who don't know the context, it's this really cool thing at the Truman Library in Independence, Missouri, where you get to do these simulations of major decisions that Truman made while in the White House. And they have like 4 or 5 different options you can choose from. And people get assigned different roles, role of president, secretary, and they read historical documents. And then they make decisions based off of that. And who knows, if you decided in the White House Decision Center that you wanted to go to war, you have those trebuchets that you've made in physics. So you can just go on over to the White House and begin the launch from there.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really fun. My first year, my role was I was a Saudi prince. So that was cool.
Or a Saudi prince. That's where your acting experience at HBHA theater came in handy. You were versatile enough to play the Saudi prince.
Yes. But then my second year was actually really cool because I was the press secretary. So I actually didn't have a position that I was advocating for. I got to like go into every room and take notes, and then I got to run the press briefing at the end of the day. So that was really fun.
Yeah, and that seems like a spot where you would thrive. I'm pretty sure I was there for both of those events, and yeah, it's a really, really cool, really fun experience.
I got to channel the West Wing, and any day where I get to channel the West Wing, I'm happy. It's one of my favorite shows ever.
It's a great show. It's a great show. All right, before I let you go, Eliana, I always like to have some kind of more fun, festive questions to wrap things up on. We've talked about some heavy subjects. We talked about, the Jewish texts and your history degree, and some fun and lively memories at HBHA where you nearly perished but did survive in an overturned canoe. Behind you, over your right shoulder, we can see you have a very impressive bookshelf here, and like any good bookshelf, it cannot contain all the books and it's spilling over. So I know that you're a big reader. It doesn't have to be from that shelf. Any book that it could be a book you've read recently or one you've read a long time ago, but that really sticks with you that you would recommend to people. It could be fiction, nonfiction, but something where you're like, people should read this. You'll get a lot out of it.
So last night I finished a book. It's top of mind. I don't know if this is a book that I would mention if I hadn't finished it literally 12 hours ago. I just finished Small Gods by Terry Pratchett. Mm-hmm. It's a really interesting, it's really funny. It's really funny. Terry Pratchett is very funny. But it's also a really interesting take on organized religion and the nature of organized religion. It's totally absurd, but it's awesome. So Small Gods is really great. And I just want to say I have you to thank for for the way that I track the books that I read. Okay. I don't know if I ever said this, but you post every year the list of the books that you read. And I saw that you do that once I graduated and we were allowed to be friends on Facebook. And I started doing
the real reason to graduate from HBHA is to become Facebook friends with me.
Yes. And so now I keep track of the books that I read every year, and I set reading goals, and I'm a Goodreads user. But so I don't know if I ever said that out loud, but if anyone wants good book recommendations, I have many, but also like you are really the person to go for that.
Oh, I'm honored. I mean, I do love giving out a good book recommendation. Although I must admit, also I'm always slightly shamed every year because I'll share my reading list, and then you and I will usually talk, and I'll ask, "What did you read?" And you'll usually have about doubled up my total. Which you know what? It's not about the numbers game. It's about the love of reading and the immersion in a beautiful story. But that's great. Okay, we know that you are very into theater, both in terms of watching and in terms of performing. What would be your dream role if you could be in any show? It could be a musical or non-musical, but knowing you, I'm going to guess it's going to be a musical. But if you were just given a blank check and they said you can be any role you want in any show, what would you want to star as?
That's so hard.
I know.
There's so many good ones.
You can pick three. I don't care. We could go another hour and you can just name whatever roles you want.
I think at the moment I'm very into Ragtime. Ragtime is a show that I've been listening to a lot. It's coming back
a couple of times, but it is really good.
Well, it's coming back to Broadway in the fall, so if you're in New York and want to catch it, I'm seeing it in November. I'm very excited. I'd love to play Mother in Ragtime. She's got some really interesting. She's a really interesting character, but not so fun. If we're picking a fun role, I don't know. Satine in Moulin Rouge sounds real fun.
Oh yeah. And you've seen it enough times that you could.
Yeah. I would have said Elphaba, but now that Cynthia Erivo has done it, I think I'm tapped out.
Gotcha. Back in the Idina Menzel days, you thought you could slide on in, but now you can't. You're like, I can't. I'll leave this to the professionals.
Yeah.
That's a good one. You referenced The West Wing. I know that you also are a fairly avid TV watcher. What's your favorite show of all time and why? Is it The West Wing or is it going in a different direction?
It is The West Wing. The West Wing is my favorite show of all time. I think it is the first 4 seasons for sure are just brilliantly written. It really does an ensemble cast perfectly, I think. And it's just, I don't know, it gives me hope for the world a little bit. It's like it's good.
An idealized version of what like a democracy can be, what like American politics can be if it's going well. And it's a great show with amazing performances and really great dialogue, even if it's usually people maybe aren't quite that witty off the cuff all the time, but that's what TV's for.
Yeah, that's what TV's for. That's why we have writers.
Exactly. You mentioned obviously at the beginning we were talking about like lesser known women stories in the Bible, and how you're just kind of interested in those lesser known stories. So what is, maybe it could be just from anything you've studied, what is your favorite lesser known Jewish, it doesn't have to be specifically in the Torah, but lesser known Jewish story that you're like, people, if you don't know a lot about such and such character, you should read up about them, or you should find the source here and read the story just because it's a really interesting thing to learn about. Who's a character who doesn't get a lot of play, not your Moses, not your Abraham, but someone who people should do a dive on and learn about because it's a really cool story.
So the like women answer to this is I love the story of Tamar. It's in the book of Genesis. She's there. It's like one chapter.
Tell us a little about her for people who might not know that much about her story.
So Tamar initially is married to Judah's son. She's Judah's daughter-in-law, but then Judah's son dies, or God like smites him. And so then Judah has Tamar married to his second son. And then he is also killed by God. And then Judah only has one son left who's young, and basically says, like, first of all, this kid's a child. Like, you can't marry him right now. Like, go to your fathers, go back home. like eventually like I'll come back for you. And so he sort of like kicks her out, and she goes home, and then eventually Judah's third son grows up, and he does not send him to go and marry her. And so she's basically been abandoned. And so she takes matters in her own hands. She goes to where she knows Judah will be, and she sort of disguises herself. And he passes by and he propositions her. He's like, hey, like let's sleep together, whatever. And so she does. And he's about to leave, and she goes, well, you have to pay me. And so he gives her his staff and other identifying objects. And then she goes back home. She takes off her disguise. And then it is revealed that she's pregnant. And so she shows up at Judah's home and says, I'm pregnant. And he wants to have her executed for being promiscuous. And she says, well, the owner of this staff and seal is the father of my child. And Judah's like, oh, that's mine. Sorry. And so he doesn't formally marry her, but like they have children, and it is that line that King David is descended from. And so I love her story because she takes her future into her own hands, and she figures out how to get what she needs from the men in her life, and she has very little power, but she uses it as far as it can go. And then she ends up being the mother of the line that produces King David. And I love her story in conjunction with Ruth, who is another ancestor of King David, who is another woman who has very limited power and uses it to her advantage, and ends up being, I think she's David's great-great-grandmother. I don't remember exactly how many generations are in between, but that the line of King David is secured by women who don't give in to being shoved off to the side.
You know what? I think it's about as good a place to end as we could hope to wrap up with an inspiring story, a great message about taking control of your life. You know, you are right now a little bit out of college, have done some awesome things in the years that have followed, taking control of your own life. And look at that, me weaving it together into a parable of your own, and
Old Bartora.
I'm sure that people will love hearing about what you studied at college, and also what you've done. And also, I can speak for myself. I'm very curious to see where your future path is going to keep going with this, because it sounds like, you've kind of opened the door to this path of the world of Jewish education. Maybe you'll stay in there, and there's all sorts of avenues you could do there, or you might go in a different direction, or you might end up starring as Satine in Moulin Rouge, which would be quite awesome. I
don't think that one's gonna happen, but we'll see.
But anyway, it has been absolutely wonderful hearing from you, getting to catch up, getting to relive all 4 of these amazing HBHA plays. While you got in a plug for the spring play for this year, which I appreciate. Maybe I'll do like a promo code Eliana, and you can get like $2 off your ticket just by if you drop your name and say that you heard about it from this podcast episode. But Eliana, it is always so great to talk to you and hear about what you're doing. So thank you so much for joining us today on HBHA Lore.
Thanks for having me. This was so fun.
Bye-bye.